been September since we had our last Mudroom. There's so many things going on at AVA besides the Mudroom, which is certainly a highlight for sure. Thank you, Cheryl, for organizing this and her team. In addition to something like this, we have, you know that we have classes for all ages. We have free community programs throughout the week. We have free artist talks and exhibitions throughout the year. In fact, tomorrow night, if you can make it back, we're having an opening for our annual juried art show. So it's from 5 to 7. It should be a lot of fun. And in case you don't remember, AVA is open to the public Tuesday through Saturday from 11 to 5. We have all of what I just mentioned, including an amazing members gallery where you can pick up anything from cards to fine art for your own possessions. In addition to that, I hope you'll consider becoming a member of AVA if you haven't thought about it already. It's fun and it comes with a few perks. I hope you'll consider celebrating our 50th anniversary as we get into 2023. It's pretty amazing that AVA started out in a little barn in Norwich. Well, maybe it was a big barn in Norwich, but just a handful of people. And then it moved to Hanover, and it's been in this building for over 30 years. So. And I hope, if you're feeling in the mood, that you'll consider participating in a gift matching plan that Mrs. Dorothy Byrne has instigated. So for every donation we get between now and December 31st, it will be doubled by Mrs. Byrne. So if you're in the mood. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce the MC, the first MC, I should say, Judith Hertog. Whose birthday is tonight. But wait. We have another birthday in our midst, and that is the mother of one of our storytellers, Kevin Gallagher's mother, Claire. It happens to be her birthday tonight. I was going to ask you to applaud, but I can see that you needed no prompting whatsoever. It's a time to celebrate, so let's seriously celebrate. Have a great time.
Thank you so much. And Kevin's mother, where are you? There! It is a great day for birthday. And it's so good to be back here. I kind of forgot how this works because we haven't had a mudroom in a long time. It's so good to be back here. And it's so good to be sharing stories again. I think that's really what we need in these times of social media, everyone fighting online, all these opinions. I think we just need to relate to each other as people and hear each other's stories. And one thing I always say when I present is, you don't have to wait for a big audience to tell a story. You can just invite some friends over to your house and sit in a circle and have a story evening. That's what I like to do. And if at any time during this evening you remember a story you would love to share, keep in mind that after the intermission we'll pick a story from the audience. We have a little basket there where you can drop a note if you have a story you want to share, and hopefully we'll have some story ideas we can pick from, and we may draw your name to tell a story after the intermission. So please keep that in mind. I hope you'll be inspired to tell a story. And let me introduce our first storyteller, Jess Marbacker, or Marbacher in German. I'm not sure, actually. I forgot to ask you how to pronounce your name. Marbacher, probably, right?
Yes.
Thank you. And Jess is a native of New Hampshire. She is also a playwright, right? And she's also a returning storyteller. She has told wonderful stories before that I remember very clearly. Please welcome Jess.
So my story is a little out of season, but it's anything goes night. So I was going to be spending the first full Christmas with my boyfriend's family, and I was a little nervous about it. I had met them all before, but it sounded like a much different holiday experience than what I had had growing up. For Christmas at my family, we always just had my parents and my brother and me, and it was a very laid-back day. But Christmas with my boyfriend's family sounded more of a whole thing. You know, it wasn't just going to be his parents and his siblings. His conservative aunt and uncle who liked to pepper me with questions about the political polling I was doing for work at the time would be there. His great aunt Evelyn, who liked to corner people and talk at them for a full hour before finally falling asleep, would be there. She was so infamous for this that they had nicknamed that Getting Evelyn. And he had two kind of cool aunts that would be there as well. But it was a lot more people and a lot more pressure than I was used to. But that was the compromise we had made. So we would do Christmas Eve with my family and then Christmas Day with his. So we went to my parents' house for Christmas Eve. And my mom and I did our tradition of sharing a bottle of wine, and then I did my tradition of lying down on the living room floor for half an hour because it's surprisingly comfortable after you've had half a bottle of wine. But I was feeling a little more relaxed after that, and a little less worried about going over to my boyfriend's parents' house. But after he drove us the 40 minutes over there that night, the wine silliness had worn off, and I was just sleepy at that point. So it was about 11 o'clock at night, and I was hoping we would just go upstairs, do a quick hello, followed closely by a quick goodnight, and go to bed. But one of his aunts had gotten there early, and they were still all up talking in the kitchen, so we stayed up for probably another hour, so as not to be rude, until some hero among the group said, well, we should get to bed. So my boyfriend went to go fill up our air mattress, his mom went to grab our sheets, and I went to brush my teeth. And while I was washing up, I was thinking, okay, this isn't so bad. I'm doing this is fine. You know, it's going to be more people, but it'll be okay. But then I ran into his mother on the way back from the bathroom. And his mother said, good night, sweetie. I love you. Now, for most people, this might not be a problem, but I fucking froze. I went full deer in the headlights and just stared at her. And I don't know why. I had said I love you to her son. That wasn't the problem. But maybe it was, you know, my family doesn't really say I love you that much. We all do. We all love each other. We just don't feel the need to say it that much. So that someone else's mother was telling me that she loved me was a little startling. So maybe that was wrapped up in it. Maybe that's why I froze. Maybe it was the fact that I was having a flashback to this guy I dated in college who looked a little bit like a weasel and always tasted like juicy fruit and told me he loved me after we'd been going out for 1 month. Maybe at that point I was just really tired and couldn't muster anything more than a blank stare. But whatever it was horrible. It was several long, excruciating minutes of standing 6 feet away from my boyfriend's mother, staring at her with her staring back. It was panic written all over my face, with panic slowly starting to appear on hers as she realized I was going to say nothing. Nothing. So finally, she says, well, happy ho-ho. And I say, you too. To that I can say you too. To happy ho-ho, a thing that no one says. To that I managed to say you too. I don't know where that was minutes, seconds earlier. Instead I had to do something mortifying right before bed, as though sleeping on an air mattress that deflates twice during the night wasn't going to keep me up enough. But keep me up it did. I walked back to the room we were staying in and decided not to tell my boyfriend that I may have just torpedoed my relationship with his mother by being an emotionally stunted adult woman who doesn't like to talk about her feelings. Instead, I waited until he fell asleep and I texted my best friend. But unfortunately, she didn't have any advice because she had never been in that situation. So I laid awake a little while longer, and then I started to come up with a plan. And my plan was that my boyfriend's mother's birthday was in February. It's the beginning of February. And normally, he would get her a gift and a card, and maybe sign my name to the card, but I was kind of just there. But what if this year, instead, I got her a card just from me, and I signed it, "Love, Jess." And then everything would be fine, and we would never have to talk about it again. It would just disappear from our collective consciousness, and we'd move on. So I woke up the next morning, and I had this plan. I felt pretty good. We made it through breakfast. The family did their gifts, and I sat there awkwardly. The rest of the family started to arrive. We did the whole bit, got through dinner, and then we were saying goodbye. Going around giving goodbye hugs to everyone. And I go up to my boyfriend's mother to start giving her a hug, and I see that she has tears in her eyes. And then as I hug her, she starts crying in my arms, in the middle of the kitchen, on Christmas, with the entire family around us. And she starts apologizing to me. She's saying, "I'm so sorry, Jess, I'm so sorry. I was up all night thinking about it. I didn't mean to make you feel uncomfortable." And I said, no, I'm sorry. I was just tired. I was so tired. You didn't make me feel uncomfortable. Which is a goddamn lie. But my boyfriend's dad was starting to notice that his wife was crying in my arms. Luckily, no one else was really starting to notice, and I was patting her on the back, and then we stopped hugging and made our escape, got in the car, and we're on our way home. But then in the car, I told my boyfriend what happened. And I said, "But don't worry, I have a plan." Because this birthday card idea still sounded really good to me. It seemed solid. I was going to do it. So then, a little over a month later, I did give her a birthday card and signed it, "Love, Jess." And the whole thing kind of just disappeared into the ether. Until the next time my boyfriend's mom told me she loved me. But that time, as though she had simply said, "Happy ho-ho," I said, "You too." But the real best possible resolution for everyone involved is that I ended up marrying her son. And now she says, "I love you to us both." And my husband replies for the both of us, "You too." And I don't have to say a damn thing. Thank you.
Has your mother heard the story?
No, and she won't.
Don't tell her. Thank you so much. And you guys are so lucky, by the way, today, because all the storytellers today are repeat storytellers who have proven themselves great storytellers. So let me invite the next person, Vicki Bridge. Vicki, where are you? Vicki is coming to us all the way from North Newport. She's a librarian. You're a gardener, but this is a traveling story.
So one of my passions is traveling, and when I very first started traveling, I was buying a lot of souvenirs, and it occurred to me that when you buy souvenirs, you have to carry them with you, and that's money I could spend on more traveling. So I stopped buying souvenirs. I would buy maybe a scarf or a piece of jewelry, some junk jewelry, or novelty socks in the airport. And then I had this epiphany. I love to knit, and I thought I could take my knitting and I can combine it with my travel, and I can design socks based on where I've been. So I have some examples. This is a Roman mosaic that I did. This is from Turkish tiles in Istanbul. But these socks, these tulip motif socks from Amsterdam. When I was in Amsterdam, I went to the flower show in Amsterdam. And so when I came out of the flower show, it was about 5 o'clock, and my flight wasn't until 10, so I thought, I'll find some yarn. So I went to the yarn store, and I bought 4 skeins of yarn and some needles, and headed to the airport. Spent about $40 on 40 euro, which is maybe like 45, almost 50 US dollars at the time. So I get to the airport and I find my gate and I get out my computer and I'm designing my socks and I've got my headphones on because I'm listening to a book and I'm designing socks. I'm in bliss because this is what I love to do. And so I finish the pattern and I start knitting and I'm knitting away and I'm looking around and I'm thinking, there should be other people at the gate by now. So I'm knitting a little bit more. I said, no, there really should be other people here. So I get up and I go look at the departures board. And yes, they have changed the gate. So I rush back and I throw everything into my bag and I run down the terminal and I get to the gate and I get there just in time to see my plane backing away from it. I'm like, no, come back. I was like, the agent, I'm like, they can come back, right? She said, no, can't do that. It is the passenger's responsibility to watch the gate changes. So what am I going to do? And she said, you're going to have to buy another ticket. So, yeah, it got a little bit more expensive. So I'm walking back down through the terminal. It's totally deserted. The shops are closed. The kiosks are closed. Everything's closed. There aren't even cleaning people in the terminal. There's nobody there but me. And I'm walking down through the terminal, and I look down and there's this person dressed all in black pants, black shirt, black balaclava, holding a great big black gun. And I thought, well, they take security pretty serious here. So I kept on walking, and down that way I saw two more of these SWAT team people, and wow, something's going on. I don't know what's going on. And I walk some more, and I see some more off in other directions. And I get down into the arrivals hall because I need to find someplace to buy a ticket. It's empty, absolutely empty. There's no one in the arrivals hall. But it's 11 o'clock at night. But there's one woman at the information booth. So I went to her and I'm like, I missed my flight. I don't know what to do. There's nobody here. I can't buy a ticket. She said, get online, get on your phone, buy a ticket. So I sat down and I bought my ticket. 400 euro later, I've got my ticket to Rome in the morning. And I'm like, what's with the security? She said, I don't know. I don't know what you mean. So now I need to find a place to sleep because it's really late. And I go to the transportation terminal at Schiphol. It's a beautiful transportation terminal. And I come into the terminal and it's filled with travelers. All kinds of people in there, just standing around with their suitcases. I'm like, what's going on? And there are guards at all the doors. And they won't let anybody in or out. And I can see the airport hotel. I can see the sign across the parking lot. And I go to the door and I'm like, I just got to go out. And he said, no, we're on lockdown. It's been a bomb threat. Nobody goes in or out of the airport. And I was so tired and so upset. So I found a side door and I slipped out and I ran across the parking lot to the hotel. And I see these guys with the guns. I'm like, how did I not get shot running across the parking lot? But it was fun. So I get into the hotel. The lobby's full of people. Everybody's talking. And I go to the desk, and the manager is there. And I said, I need a room. And he said, I have no rooms. There are no rooms for you. No rooms. We're totally full. And I said, do you have a couch in your office? He said, no, there's no place for you to sleep here. And that's when I started to cry. And the manager was very sweet. He took me into the bar, and he said to the bartender, give her whatever she wants. So I had a gin and tonic, and pretty soon the manager comes and he says, I've arranged a hotel and a taxi for you. So I get in the taxi. There's another 25, 30 euro in these socks. I go to the hotel, I check in, I sleep for 3 hours. I That's 100 euros an hour, and get back on the plane, get back to the airport, and fly back to Rome. So yes, these are like $900 socks.
Thank you so much, Vicki. And if anyone is inspired at this point and is starting to think of their own disasters or awkward interactions, remember, we have a basket there. Please submit your own story idea, because after intermission, we'd love to hear a story from the audience. And by the way, Vicki, where are you now? Oh, she did. Well, my daughter had a very similar story a week ago at the same airport, and I told her your story to console her. Maybe that'll be a story another time. I think it's too fresh still at this point. Our next storyteller is Kevin Gallagher, who's coming here all the way from Burlington, and he is he's here often as a guest. He's a wonderful storyteller. He also tells stories in Burlington, where he works as a psychotherapist, but also is the co-founder of the storytelling organization Say It Forward. Please welcome Kevin. And by the way, we also have to wish him a happy birthday, because that was last week, right? No. Monday.
Catholic school uniforms are not really conducive to PE classes. Neither are the habits that the nuns wear, which is why you don't really have PE in Catholic school. So while I developed a great love for Jesus, I did not develop a great love for exercise. So probably no surprise to kind of know that by college, my daily regimen consisted of 3 packs of cigarettes and as many Tab, if anyone remembers Tab, sodas that I could drink. But you know, something happens sort of like in your later 20s, early 30s, your prefrontal lobe sort of lights up, you realize, you know, things about the world. And so I thought, oh, this isn't really going to go anywhere very well, so I got to kind of change my lifestyle. And I still had no love of exercise. You know, as Marie Kondo would say, it did not spark joy for me. But I did trade in my cigarettes and my Tab for sneakers and a gym membership. And I can still remember the very first gym I went to. The look on the poor personal trainer's face as she was giving me the tour of the place, because literally I'd never seen any of this equipment before. It was like I was from another planet. And she's like, for example, this is the abductor machine. This works your inner and your outer thighs. And I said, I didn't even know I had inner and outer thighs. And she said, yes, and you have to remember, if you do, you know, however long you do the abductor, you have to do the adductor the same amount of time, otherwise you'll lose symmetry. So I could end up with like really large outer thighs and non-existent inner thighs, and she said, exactly. And I thought, oh my God, like, no wonder I've never been to a gym. So I stayed there for a couple of months. One of the things I didn't like is that any personal trainer at any time could just yell out abs, and everyone had to drop to the floor and do abs. And you know, you get to a certain age where I'm not dropping to the floor when someone tells me to. So I decided to go to the YMCA, because the Y had a pool, and I already knew how to swim. There's a little equipment except a bathing suit. And I wouldn't have to worry about all that symmetry stuff that would be going on. So after a couple months of swimming, I was in the hallway, and the membership director said, hey Kevin, can I talk to you for a second? I'm like, sure. What's up? And he said, well, I'm wondering if you would be willing, if we reimburse you your entire year's membership, would you agree to not come back to the Y again? And I said, how come? And he said, well, we've had a lot of complaints about you in the pool. He said, it seems like you don't stay in your lane. And this was not news to me, you know, because without glasses, I'm a pretty diagonal swimmer. You know, so I was always polite. I always like apologized, and I tried not to touch people in parts of their bodies they don't want to be touched. But I knew I wasn't, like, you know, doing it correctly. And I said, well, if I agree to not use the pool, can I kind of stay and use the other stuff that I don't know how to use, really? Oh, yeah, we just thought you liked the pool. So, yeah, you can stay in. So I started using equipment and weights and that kind of stuff. And I can actually say, sort of after like several years, I became like a regular at the gym. You know, I had my regimen, you know, that I would do during the week. But then aging starts. I mean, I've been aging since birth, but you know, it's sort of like, it starts picking up speed later on, like 50, you know, sort of. And suddenly my gym membership was about double the cost because of medical appointments, PT, chiropractic, you know, better shoes, orthotics. And so I sort of thought like, wow, this is going to be expensive. And my first experience of this sort of aging dynamic was, I was in a class. The teacher, she had a very soft voice, and there was really loud music, and it was like one of those step classes or CrossFit classes. And I couldn't hear her. You know, so I'd say sort of like, can you hear her? Can you hear her? And everyone's like, yeah. So I'm like, well, it must be me. So the next time I was at the doctor for a physical, I didn't know the doctor. She was only 16 or 17 at the time. Very creamy, white, pale. She listened very intently to me. And so I said, I wanted to ask you, I said, I have a hard time like hearing the instructor in one of my gym classes. And I also have a hard time hearing my partner, but he mumbles, so that could be some of the problem there. And she listened and listened. She looked in my ears and she said, well, has anyone ever talked to you about hearing aids? And I said, hearing aids? I don't need hearing aids. I was thinking like waxy buildup, not hearing aids. Sir, a lot of people your age get very defensive when medical professionals bring up hearing aids. And I'm screaming at her saying, I'm not defensive, I don't need hearing aids. So she said, well, if you decide you want an appointment with an audiologist, we can have your hearing tested and have you fitted for hearing aids. So that was a total waste of a copay, in my opinion. But it wasn't long after that, I was in the PT's office for some pain in my left cheek. And after a proper assessment, he said, you know, you've sprained your gluteus. And I said, I've sprained my ass? I said, I've been alive for over 50 years, and I've never heard of an athlete, I've never heard of anybody spraining their ass. I didn't even think you could sprain an ass. And he said, well, you sprained yours. And I'm like, well, what do you do with a sprained ass? He said, same thing you do with a sprained ankle. You have to stay off it. And I said, I'm a psychotherapist. I sit on my ass for a living. I can't not sit. And so I said, what else can I do? And he said, well, we could try like 4 weeks. If you come in twice a week, we would do, you know, sort of an hour of massage and then some heat stuff. So for the next month, twice a week, and it's not a private PT office, it's like one of those big athletic ones, 8 tables and PTs on every table with all these buff athletes from the university, you know, and so there's some poor PT who pulled the short straw, you know, massaging my ass for an hour and then applying heat, you know. So, but I continued to persevere. I sort of got a little reputation at the Y when they built the new one in Burlington. And my picture is now kind of affixed to the wall, a very large version of me outside the men's locker room. And it was actually kind of funny, a student who I saw as a client, his parents were in town and he was taking them around to show them the new Y because it was so beautiful. It is very beautiful. And they walked by this thing of me, and this college kid goes, oh my God, like that's my therapist. And his mother said, your therapist is a model? Yeah, and that's what he did. He goes, no, really, he is not a model. He is really old. And so, you know, I don't feel that old, but you know how you catch yourself sometimes in a store window and you think, God, that is me, isn't it? You know, but I'm pretty sure the good sisters of St. Joseph, myself actually, would have never imagined that in midlife I would rise to kind of fame as the YMCA poster child. And you know, Jesus told me a very long time ago that I wasn't going to do many things straight, including swimming. So since then, I have been living a very diagonal life with symmetrical thighs.
I hope you all put your name in to tell a story after intermission. And I have some cake here because of our birthday girls. So there's some cake at intermission, and I don't know, you're gonna have to, like, I didn't bring napkins, but you know, anyway, there it is. So.
Really great odds. The chances are 100%, right? So from the audience, we have Hank 181, better known as Henry Bromberg.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good. I grew up in a small town in south central Pennsylvania. It's the capital, but most people don't know it's the capital. Anyway, small streets, you know, safe neighborhoods. Back in the early 50s, all the kids were out riding bikes. You know, at night, my mom would be yelling, "Kids, come in," we'd come in, and everything was great. Most of the houses were what you call connected. So our family was here, and then there's a wall, and then that family was over there. But next door to us was one of the single family homes. And those folks were older, they didn't have any kids, and my family, there were 3 of us kids. So they sort of adopted us, you know, we were allowed to run through their backyard. Really nice people. Comes Easter time, or Passover time, and they felt really bad for us Jewish kids because our parents wouldn't get us the little colored chicken peas. I don't know, in my town, okay, it happened other places other than south central Pennsylvania. So we got the cutest little peep, and we had to name it. And a backstory, my mom never let us have a pet. She was too smart. She knew who was going to take care of that pet. So, but you can't turn down the nice neighbors. So here's this cute little peep, and we had a contest, who could name the peep, and it turned out that my sister, older sister, always got her way. So the peep ended up being Fluffy. So, you know, we didn't know this, but the other peeps in the neighborhood were slowly dying off after a week or so, but not Fluffy. Fluffy lived on, and it's probably because my mom knew how to make 3 things in the kitchen, and Fluffy liked them all. It was meatloaf on Mondays, it was blintzes on Tuesday, and it was, oh yeah, Mrs. Paul's fish sticks on Thursday. So Fluffy just blossomed and grew, and so, you know, somewhere Easter and Passover in April-ish time, so it's May, now we're out of school, and summer's coming, and it's hot and humid, and we're all outside all the time, and Fluffy's outside with us, just running around. One day, early, we hear this noise out back. Fluffy just lived out back. I mean, it was a safe neighborhood, as I mentioned. And we hear this noise, and we had never heard this noise before, and so we look out the window, and it's Fluffy. There's nothing else out there, and yeah, Fluffy was a he. Fluffy was a he. and the things that grow on the back or wherever of the chicken when it's a he. Fluffy started exhibiting those little nuances. Now the neighbor is such a great guy, so the next day he brings over a chicken house that he built or bought, I'm not sure which. But now Fluffy has his own home. Right, exactly. And it's just so much fun. Fluffy now has the run of the neighborhood, and so Fluffy could be and it's a safe neighborhood. Remember, he's running up the street and down the street, and everyone knows Fluffy, and Fluffy knows where the good food is in the neighborhood. And when it was time for dinner, my mom, who was from the Bronx, and so she was loud, would just open up the front door and yell. And Fluffy would just come back to the house and go right to the back where Fluffy's bowl was, and typically, depending on which night it was either, blah, blah, blah. But Fluffy loved blintzes and got more blintzes than, anything else because we didn't like my mom's blintzes. But that's another story, perhaps. So one day, I'm out back with Fluffy and throwing the ball with my brother, and who knows what we're doing. And we had this garage, and on top of the garage, oh my God, there's a cat. And the cat is poised, like, ready to pounce. And my brother looks at me, and I look at him, and my brother starts to find a rock or something to throw at the cat. Too late, the cat jumps down. It was later in life that I realized Fluffy was not the only tough rooster in this world. I mean, they fight. So Fluffy kicked the living tar out of that cat. And now the story around the neighborhood is, we got the toughest cat. I don't care what his name is. Okay, fast forward to September. That's around the time when the Jewish people call that the high holidays. We didn't know what the inference was way back then, but anyway, the high holy days. And we would always go to New York where all our relatives lived. We were the country cousins. And so Fluffy had to go somewhere. Well, back in the good old days, you got your milk delivered, you got your eggs delivered, and you got your chickens delivered. It was Larry the chicken man. And so, of course, my mom made a deal with Larry. Fluffy could, she was a regular customer. So Fluffy went to live with Larry on Larry's chicken farm. And we went to New York and prayed and got blessed and, all that stuff. We come back and when are we going to go get Fluffy? When are we go? We're a little busy now, kids. Let the dust settle. We'll go get Fluffy. So, but she had to break the news to us. Fluffy was morte. Fluffy got into it with one too many of Larry's roosters or chicken layer. We never got the full story, but there was no more Fluffy. And that was our only pet, and we knew we weren't going to get another pet because the neighbors knew they weren't going to do that again. So, but Friday nights is chicken night at our house. So the first Friday night after the news broke, we all looked at each other when the chicken ended up on the table, and it was like, Mom, Mrs. Paul's, but no chicken.
Thanks, Henry. It's really great. Anybody can do it. You just put your name in the hat, and his odds are, Winner, chicken dinner. Our next storyteller is Alan Field. Aside here happens to be my husband, and I'm looking at it, and on his bio it says, lives in Lebanon, New Hampshire, where he and wife and I raised 2 children. I think it's a typo, or there's something I don't really know that's going on in our home. Anyway, I think it's a typo. Ellen is a retired carpenter and a Zen teacher and a storyteller. So let's welcome Ellen.
What's that? So, like Henry's older sister, my mother was the oldest child, the only daughter in her family, and used to getting her way. So when she announced at age 95 that 95 was old enough and she was going to stop eating, we were not entirely surprised. She was the kind of person who would take control of the situation, and so we said, okay, and she stopped eating, but she lived on bouillon cubes for 2 months. Can you imagine those little salty cubes? You know, beef and chicken bouillon. This is what she lived on for starting at that point. She also, at one point along the way, she got a cold. She was quite sick. She refused all medication. She didn't want any treatment. She was a retired nurse. She knew about the healthcare system, but she refused all medication and she recovered from her cold. So this continued for a couple of months, and at the end of 2 months, she was just skin and bones. There was really not much left to her. And at that point, she looked at me and she said, I'm going to stop eating and drinking. And I knew, I was sure, that this could not go on for more than 3 days. On the 3rd day, I walked into her bedroom. She sat up in her bed and she looked me in the eye and she said, I've been trying to die and it's not working. Of course it was working. But from her standpoint, something was not quite right. She said, bring me my favorite cream of broccoli soup and a glass of sherry. So it actually felt like a momentous moment in her life, something that maybe it took 95 years for her to come to, was this resolution to let nature take its course. She finally decided that she wasn't going to do anything about her situation. She was just going to eat whatever she felt like. And so for another 2 months, she just had like a 1/4 inch of sherry every day and her favorite foods. And after a couple of months, a new development was that, excuse me, she started seeing people in the room that we couldn't see. So one day, a nurse came into her room, this was at Harvest Hill, and offered her some water. And my mother turned to the nurse and she said, aren't you going to offer water to the other passengers? So I was curious. I talked to her about this. It turned out she was convinced that she was on a train. She had actually grown up in a railroading family. Her father had been a railroad person when they traveled in a private railroad car. But she was very clear that she was on a train traveling somewhere, and that there were other people on the train. And I said, who are those other people? And she named them. They were uncles, they were cousins, they were people she had loved. and her family who had died. Of course, you need to understand that this was also a woman who refused all medication. She was not on any kind of mind-altering drugs. She was straight ahead, recognizing the people in her family, recognizing me, and yet she was seeing these other people. One day I walked into her room, and she said, there's someone in the other room. And I said, I just came through that room. I just walked. There was nobody there. But she said, she was insistent, and the hair on the back of my neck was kind of standing up because I just felt, this is very strange. And I went back into the other room. I looked behind the dresser. I looked behind the door. Nobody there. I said, no, nobody's there. She said, I saw him standing in the doorway. He was a young man, and he was holding a harmonica. In that moment, I remembered that she and my father had met when they were teenagers, and their first correspondence with each other was regarding a harmonica. He had a harmonica, and she wanted one just like it. So, and this is my father, who had died 48 years before, and she had lived for 48 years on her own. But she was seeing my father. She was seeing him in the room with her. And it was the very next day that I came to her bedside, and she said, I want to go to the other room. I want to go to the other room. And fortunately, at this point, I had the wherewithal not to cart her into the next room. And I just said, go, be free as a bird. And she said, thank you. And those were her last words. So that feels like the end of the story. I thought it was the end of the story. But she wasn't quite gone yet. I for the next few days, I just felt, certainly I thought it was the end of the story, because for several days I just felt everything that I did felt empty for her absence. But 3 or 4 days later, I just happened to be walking into a convenient, one of these quick marts next to a gas station. Just an very ordinary place, ordinary little store. And I walked into the door, and as I walked in that door, I just had this sense, this sudden sense, that something about the way that I looked around the room, the way that I engaged with the other people in the room, there was a strong sense that my mother was present, that she was there with me in the way that I did that. So I think informed by her own awareness of other people who had died, that I was all of a sudden just very conscious of the fact that someone that I thought was gone was still here and was with me. And I didn't miss her after that.
Thank you, Ellen. Our next storyteller is again another returnee to the Mudroom, and we're happy to have Dawn Kollisch with us tonight. Dawn has told stories before at the Mudroom, and we're really, really glad to have him. And so please join me in welcoming Dawn.
growing up in the suburb of New York City, the Memorial Day Parade was a very big deal. And as a Boy Scout, I joined the parade every year, starting from when I was a tenderfoot, all the way to when I was a senior patrol leader. I loved being a Boy Scout. I loved all that camping stuff, the knot tying. But I started as a very shy and sort of depressed kid. And my scoutmaster, he recognized something. He said to my parents, if I give this kid a little bit of responsibility, I think he'll mature. And he made me a patrol leader, or maybe an assistant patrol leader, I'm not sure which. But it worked. And I just loved being in that position. And so I loved marching in the Memorial Day Parade. We were a great troop. We were started by Teddy Roosevelt in 1910. We were called the Rough Riders. And we did this fancy marching up Middle Neck Road. And as the senior patrol leader, I led the march. But at the beginning of the march, I noticed that there was, and this was I think in 1968, 67. I noticed that there was an anti-war demonstration, kind of massing at the beginning. Anti-Vietnam War. And I was not just a Boy Scout, but I was in the world. And the world was a very difficult place in some ways because of that war. We all saw on television some of the horrors that were done. We saw Vietnamese villagers with skin burned off from napalm. We saw the daily body counts. We saw American soldiers coming home in boxes. And I went from my suburb into New York City. I went to these anti-war demonstrations at Columbia. I watched the signs and the shaking fists and everybody had beards. And then I stopped watching and I started joining those demonstrations. And so when I got with Boy Scouts to past the reviewing stand and I dismissed them, I had to pause and think about what I was going to do. And we were some group, we used to wear Smokey the Bear hats, shorts, knee socks, the whole thing. And I made up my mind and I went back in the parade with my Smokey the Bear hat and I joined the anti-war demonstration in the Memorial Day Parade. And as I was marching in my uniform, I saw another scoutmaster, not Mr. Bauman, not the guy who had brought me up, but scoutmaster from another troop, and he made eye contact with me, and he shook his head. So I went to Mr. Bauman, and I told him what was going on in my life, that although the uniform that I was wearing was a boy's uniform, it was beginning to look a little bit like the soldiers' uniforms to me. And I was having some trouble with this. He said, well, yep, you do have some trouble. That other guy you saw, he actually turned you in. He reported you to the council, and I had to go to bat for you and say that you were ethical and that they were not going to take away your Eagle Scout, which they wanted to do. And then there was the draft. And you have to think about what you're going to be and who you're going to be. So I asked Mr. Bauman, and he said, I don't really agree with you, Don. I'm not a pacifist. I joined the army and I fought the Nazis. But I believe you, and I believe in you. If you want to become a conscientious objector, I'll support you. And so I applied to be a conscientious objector, and I met the draft board, 3 old men. They were probably young men, but they were old men to me. They probably all were veterans, and I had to somehow speak with them on top of my essays to let them know that I really was a pacifist and that I would not kill people. And Mr. Bauman submitted a testimony of some sort saying that I was a good scout and that he believed me. And to my astonishment, I got it. I got the CO, which meant that if I were to be drafted, I would not have to fight, but rather would do alternative service, such as being a hospital orderly. It felt like I was on a path, some sort of path towards healing rather than killing. And then, of course, the rest of the story becomes rather anticlimactic. The draft originally was everybody gets drafted, except if you had a bone spur, heel spur. But then they started a lottery for about 5 or 6 years, and it was based on your birth date. And I ended up with this great number. So even if I was drafted, I didn't have to do anything, basically. I didn't have to do alternative service. I did not have to fight. But it started me on this path towards, it gave me a huge boost on this path that I began to think of as something to do with a compass, because I was a scout after all. And I was trying to find my own north. So that north led me to become a doctor, and to become a doctor who takes care of people, not diseases. And to a life that I've tried to help be authentic. But interestingly, my life as a doctor ended at the VA, at the Veterans Administration Hospital, taking care primarily of Vietnam-era vets. And most of them never heard my story. And some of them, when they heard, they just shut up. But many others said, damn, that took courage. I wish I had done that. And so I think back to that Memorial Day parade, and that scoutmaster, and that compass. And I'm sort of grateful, even grateful for that other scoutmaster who turned me in.
Thank you, Dawn. Before we introduce our last storyteller, I just want to say that we're really happy that we're back, and we have another event planned for September called First Time. So as you can tell, tonight we had anything goes because we always have a hard time picking a theme. So you can make First Time be anything, about anything you want it to be. And if you do, please go onto the website where the specifics are listed about how to pitch a story. Stories are about your own experience, not read, not memorized, and true as you remember them. So we hope people will do that. And that will be September 8th, and the deadline for story submission is August 19th. So our last storyteller of the evening is also a return storyteller who's a favorite here at the Mudroom. Sue Schmidt is from Burlington, where she has quite a resume of storytelling accomplishments, awards, and also is the mother of two great young guys who she says hope she's going to stop talking about them in public. So welcome back.
It's great to be back. So family dinner on Sundays growing up was mandatory. Aunts, uncles, cousins, grandchildren, everyone needed to show up for a minimum of 5 hours. We would eat, we would argue, we would eat, we would argue, we would watch an episode of Mutual Omaha's Wild Kingdom, and then we'd come back and we'd settle into the table and we'd tell stories. My family were amazing storytellers. Some of them were tiny little nuggets, things that had happened during the week, and others were these epic tales. I loved Sunday family dinner. I was the youngest, and so my place at the table was in the middle of what we called the bench. The bench was a 15-foot mahogany pew that my grandmother convinced the pastor of the church to sell to her during the church yard sale, even though it wasn't something that was up for sale. And so I'd be flagged on either side. One side, my cousin John, who could do amazing things with food. I once watched him eat a piece of spaghetti and then pull it out of his mouth. And on the other side, my cousin Joanne, who was 15 years my senior, who would often come back from college and have these great stories to tell, and would also have this incredible running commentary every time someone said something. At one point she leans over to me and she said, "I'm so glad you and I are adopted and we're not a part of this." So my favorite Sunday family dinner was actually the dinner that my family postponed because it was the year that I decided I was going to play Little League. Now, girls back in 1974 did not play Little League. We had softball, and softball was great, but the softball team had uniforms that had these little skirts. You know what a skirt is? It's like if shorts and a skirt had a baby. And they had these white collar shirts. They were very boring, but the boys had pinstripe knickers and caps that had an eagle on the front, and a shirt that on the front said San Remo Screamin' Eagles, and on the back said Lanasa Sand and Gravel Dig It. So when the permission slips came out, I decided I'm just going to sign up for Little League. And I kind of pushed it under my dad's nose, and dads in the 70s, like, were just happy to participate in any way. They didn't even read what they were signing. And so I got sent in. And I was like, this is great, I'm signed up. And a week later, my mom gets a call from Donna. Everybody knows Donna at Parks and Rec. And Donna says, you know, Virginia, your daughter signed up to play Little League. And now if Donna had just left it at that, but she couldn't because we know Donna, right? She's got the tiniest little bit of power that she just has to abuse. And so if she had just simply said, your daughter signed up for Little League and stopped there, my mother would have just held the phone to her chest for a second, looked at me and said, stop being weird, and that would have been the end of it. But Donna had to push it. And so Donna said, your daughter signed up for Little League and girls can't play Little League. Now in my family, arguing is something we do not because we have a disagreement or because we've been misunderstood. Arguing is something we do to show that we are fully alive. And so if you are in a room with a member of my family and you are awake, and that person is awake or lightly napping, it's an opportunity for an argument. And so I see this coming, and my mother and Donna start going into, what do you mean she can't? This is a stupid rule. And finally Donna says, look, if you don't like this, you can take it up with the town council. And my mother says, great, put us on the agenda. A minute later, she activates the emergency phone tree. And that following Tuesday, my family mount the posse and we ride. And we show up at the city council meeting, the entire family. And George Duncan looks out into the crowd and he looks at my family and he says, I just want to remind you there will be no outbursts. And so my father's going to speak for us. And so he presents a 16-page typed paper. First few pages outline baseball, the kinds of injuries. The injuries are most often with the bat and not the ball. He has a couple of sections on the resilience of the mammary glands. I thought that was interesting. He closes out with a summary of the Title IX law that he just passed. It was a compelling 45 minutes, let me tell you. And then he finishes by saying, in conclusion, if you have any questions, I would refer you to our attorney. And he points to my uncle. My uncle's not an attorney. No connection to the law whatsoever. What my uncle does have is a beautiful leather briefcase. It looks a lot like a briefcase an attorney would have. And he sort of snaps it open, and I can peer in, and it's got some blank pieces of loose leaf paper in it, and a little box of crackers in there. And so there's a few muffled conversations on the town council, and then they come back and they say, fine, she can play. And so I'm like, okay, I don't really even care anymore about baseball, but I feel like I've got to be a team player here, right? Because my family's gone to bat for me. So I show up at the Screaming Eagles, and I'm not going to say we were the worst team in the league. We were the worst team in the history of baseball. We can't hit, we can't field, we can't run. We are a community. San Remo is a community of Italian immigrants. We are not known for our agility or our speed. We are known for our density and our perseverance, which, as it turns out, is a really good thing in Little League because it can take days to walk every single player around the bases, twice. And so the big game comes. We're going to play the Comac Cougars, and it's on a Sunday. My family decides, of course, that we're going to postpone family dinner, and we are all going to show up for the game. Now, I have spent most of the time on the bench because not everybody's crazy about me being there. One kid, Vinny Tremarco, who actually ends up becoming an attorney, says, we're the worst team because we have a girl. To which my response was, no, we're the worst team because you can't frickin' hit the ball. But I'm on the bench for a lot of the game. And so we start to play. I'm mostly on the bench. We get to like the top of the 6th inning, and the score is 14-0. And all of a sudden, the Cougars pitcher gets hurt, and they have to swap out. Now, in Little League, if you lose a pitcher, everything pretty much falls apart, and it does. And we start to hit, and we start to get around the bases, and we almost tied up. It is 13-14. We are out of folks that can hit. And the coach looks at me, and he says, you're up. So I'm like, okay, put my little cap on. I don't really know how to hit, but I get out there. Here comes the pitch. I swing. I more swat at the ball, I'd say. But the ball somehow connects with the bat. I'm so freaked out by this that I drop the bat, which then connects with the ball again, which in my mind is a double. And so the coach says, run. And so I take off. And I round first base, and the coach says, run! And I round second base, and I'm so excited about this, and I look at my family to kind of wave to them, and I trip, and I slide right into third. But I'm safe. So I'm like, okay, this is great. 13-14, this is it. Tying run, comes up to bat. It's little Vinny Tremarco. And so the coach looks at me, and he does this. And so I'm like, okay. No idea what that means. So he walks up to the police, he says, you're gonna steal. And I'm like, I don't think that's a good idea, but okay. So he's like, you're gonna steal. So here's what you're gonna do. You're gonna stare down the pitcher. You're gonna take a couple of steps off the bag, and then you are gonna run as fast as you can. So I was like, all right, sure. So I look at the pitcher and I stare down the pitcher, which looks like this. And the pitcher looks back at me, which looks like... And as soon as he releases that ball, I run as fast as I can. Run, run, run. I can hear my family in the crowd screaming, Andiamo, Andiamo! I slide into home plate. There's dust everywhere. I look up, and there's the umpire that says, out! And that's it. And the game's over. And I'm so ashamed because my family has fought so hard for this moment. And we go back to the car, and we head home, we have family dinner, and nobody really talks about it. We eat, we argue, we eat, we argue, and then the stories start. But this time it's not a story from long ago, it's a recap of the game. And my uncle starts and says, oh my gosh, how did you learn how to bunt? That was amazing. And my aunt says, when you stared that pitcher down, he was terrified. My father's like, wow, when you slid into third base, that was incredible. My cousin turns to me and she's like, what the hell game were they watching? And that was the moment I knew I was turning in my uniform. I was gonna quit. Not because I was embarrassed that my family was gonna be there for every game, and not because we were gonna lose every single game, but because the bench that I really wanted to sit on was right there in my grandparents' living room.
And thank you to all the storytellers, and thank you for everyone in the audience for coming. And we really expect some storytellers in this audience. Please, if you have a story, submit it. The theme for September is the first time, and I bet you all have some first time stories. First time storytellers, how about that? And you don't have to be brave, you don't have to be a performer. I've seen the people who say they are afraid, who have stage fright, who say they don't have story, they can't tell a story, and they end up telling the most amazing stories often. So believe in yourself, because I am sure you all have a story to tell. Please let us know what it is. See you in September.